was less personal. It wasn't a personal decision. It was a financial decision. And I had a responsibility to do the thing that was going to benefit my family the most. And that meant focusing more on my business instead of working for somebody else.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below. Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest is Henry Washington. Super excited, Henry, to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I love doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you love doing this stuff, and that's why I hear you on other podcasts, and I was so excited that I'm getting you to come on mine because when you talk with passion, you really love what you do, and I want to share that with my audience so they can experience who Henry is. Speaking of who Henry is, if you could, share a little bit about yourself, share with the listeners, who is Henry Washington?
Yeah, man, fairly new to investing, I guess, in the grand scheme of time. So I've only been investing for about 5 years. Bought my first house 5 years ago after I had a panic attack because I didn't have any money and I had a new wife who needed me to have money, and that was scary. And started to realize that even though I had a good job and I did all the things society tells you to do, that I still wasn't in a good place financially. It's because those things, like, we know that in the back of our mind, but like in my head, I was like, oh, at some point I'll figure it out. And I guess I wasn't totally wrong, but I had a panic attack because I tried to buy a house with my wife and I couldn't be on the loan because my credit sucked. And then I started to realize, like, it's just one of the things that, like, I as a provider wanted to be able to provide. Shelter. We talked about dream homes. I couldn't afford a dream home. Couldn't be on the loan for the home we were in. Kids, I couldn't even imagine having enough money to support another person. I was barely trying to support my new wife. And so I knew I had to make some sort of financial change. And so I had a panic attack at 3 a.m. because I was realizing all these things. And I was like, she's going to leave me at some point and then I'll be stuck. And so in my panic, I started to Google, how can I make some extra money? I was Googling, I tried to Google all the money buzzwords. So it was like cash flow, passive income, side hustle, like anything that was like money related. I was like, tell me how to get to it. And the theme I was seeing across all these random 3 a.m. Google searches was real estate. There was some form of somebody doing something in real estate. And so it just made me think. It made me think a couple of things. One, it opened my eyes to the fact that real estate was a legitimate path for me. Up until that point, I just assumed rich people and corporations own real estate. So it never crossed my mind to be a landlord. And then I started to notice that, like, these are just regular people. And I was like, well, if all these regular people are building wealth and becoming financially free and making all this extra money on the side, I was like, well, I'll figure it out. So that's how I found real estate. And I just made a decision to go for it. And I started to immerse myself in anything I could that was real estate related. And it took me about 90 days of research and immersion before I bought my first property. And then I bought that property, and it was such an eye-opening experience for me that I realized a couple of things. One, I realized, hey, I did it. I found this thing that's going to actually make me some extra money. And the other thing I realized was that it was way more powerful than I ever thought, because that first property, through leverage, we were able to buy maybe 10 or 12 more just from leveraging a HELOC on that first property. And I was like, this is insane. And I remember I wrote down my goals with my wife that before we got started, we were going to buy one house every year for the next 5 years was our goal. And when I bought that first one and got the itch, it's how powerful it was. I was like, oh man, that's a bad goal. So we ended up changing it, and we bought 5 deals in our first month. We went crazy. And that's my origin story. I don't do much different now than I did then. I'm still a buy and hold guy. I just acquire as much as I can.
All right. Yeah. Henry, right on. What a way to get started. That 3 a.m. panic attack. Nothing good happens at 3 a.m., but something good came out of this one, right? So you're sitting here, couldn't sleep that night, just, I don't know what to do. I need to figure out a way to make more money. And I think a lot of people fall into that category, especially people in my audience as well, right? Like these average Joes and average Janes, right? They're like, hey, middle-class Americans, and we want to figure out a way to either increase our income, increase our cash flow, find a way to get out of our 9-to-5 job if that's what their goal is. And a lot of times people look to the internet, right? They look to the Google, and you're making that search and you start looking at some of those buzzwords, you can get down so many rabbit holes. But I'm
Yeah.
glad you found that consistency of real estate and decided to go that route, because man, there's sometimes you can Google some stuff and wind up getting
Yeah.
caught up in something. So no, I'm glad you found real estate, Henry, because your story is just awesome. And I've listened to a couple episodes with you being interviewed on Bigger Pockets. I remember the first time you were interviewed and you were sharing how you acquired so many doors right off the bat when you first got started. And that's because you set this expectation for yourself that you were able to attack. And I love how you talk about what that initial goal was. Oh yeah, we're going to maybe buy 5 properties over the next 5 years or so. And you were like, yeah, no, we need to crush that, get that out of the way and move on to something bigger. So that's awesome, man. I'd like to touch on something that you mentioned. So you realized when you bought that first property, you were able to leverage the equity in it by getting a HELOC, right? So what made you initially look at that as an option? Because I feel like a lot of people would buy that first rental property and not think to myself, oh, let me borrow against it right away to go get more deals. So what made you do that?
I didn't. Yeah, the bank made me do it.
Okay.
It was all this big realization. I guess the number one lesson is you just have to make a decision. And when you decide to do something, like truly decide, like plan A, there's no plan B. It's going to work or it's going to work. And there's no looking back, right? Truly decide with your head and your mind, like how you're going to figure that plan out will start to reveal it. It's too many times we want to do all the how, we want to get all the how laid out in a row before we take any of the action. And it actually works in the exact opposite fashion. Imperfect action is better than perfect inaction, and done is better than perfect. Those are the two phrases that seem to work perfectly with this realm. So because I made that decision, I just started to do, because I didn't know what else to do other than just give it a shot. So I surrounded myself with a bunch of investors. Everywhere there were investors in my town in a room, I got in that room and I just listened and tried to be of value in any way that I could, because I didn't know how to do it. And so I was like, I just need to be around people who do it and I'll learn something. And then I wanted to learn what was possible. You don't know what's possible, right? When you've never done it. I thought 5 deals over the 5 years was a stretch goal, right? Like I didn't know what was possible. You start to learn what's possible by surrounding yourself with people who are doing it. I've always heard the story about a guy whose first deal was a over 100-unit apartment building. And they asked him, how did you do that for your first deal? Why was that your very first deal in real estate? And he was like, I didn't know it wasn't supposed to be. All my friends own apartment buildings. And so that's just what he did. So if you surround yourself with people doing it, that will give you the boundaries, right, of what you think is possible. That's what frames it. So all that to say, I didn't know about leverage. What I did was when I got that deal under contract, I was just like, I got to find money. Who has money? Banks have money. Where's a bank? There's a bank right by my office that I work at. So I literally walked into that bank with my contract, paper contract in hand, and I would like help buying this piece of property. And they said, they looked at it and they were like, hey, this is a really good deal. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Can you finance it? And long story short, they ended up financing it and it was a real good deal. So after I closed on it, the bank called me and they said, hey, you've got equity in that property because it appraised for 160 and you bought it for 115. So we'd like to talk to you about maybe getting a line of credit against that equity, and that'll give you access to more money so that you can go bring us more deals to finance like that. And I was like, explain this to me. And so they broke it down and I was like, yeah, let's do that. That's how I learned about HELOCs, and that's how I learned about, it was really my stepping stone to learning about small local community banks, because that's the kind of bank I walked into. It wasn't some grand strategy to know about community banks. It was just the bank closest to my office. And but what I learned through talking to them was that they're like, hey, man, we have to loan money. That's how we stay in business. We have to loan money to small businesses. And we would much rather loan to someone who's going to bring us something that has more value than what you're paying for it, than loaning to somebody who's going to start a restaurant, right? And we get all this restaurant equipment that's worth less now that they bought it. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. And started to learn that strategy. So I didn't know it. What they schooled me.
That's great. That's one of the beautiful things, that the fact that you went to a local bank, right? Because they know what's going on there in the community, in the market, right? So they have a better understanding. Like when you found that good deal, they said, okay, he's going to have some equity. He's got some stuff to play with here. And it wasn't even something you were thinking about, which is awesome. So there was a lot to take away out of that answer, right? One, check out the small banks around you, right? Because a lot of times people think, oh, I can't get a loan because they're going out to these big lenders or these bigger banks, and they have tighter restrictions, right? Especially when investing outside of their normal area. But when you go out to one of those local banks that know the market and know the area, they can know what they're working with the investor that they're working with. Now, when they talk to you about the whole HELOC thing, what was going? I'm just curious, like what was going through your head when they brought that to you as an option? You were like, because for me, I'd be very surprised. Oh, the bank's bringing me an option to go buy more real estate. Yeah, please tell me more.
Yeah, no, I was all for it. The community bank is just what you said, right? It's a community bank. They understand the community. So this person who was my banker they didn't just feel like my banker. They felt a friend, someone who wanted me to succeed. Obviously,
Part of the team.
as an employee of the bank, they have a vested interest in my success. They don't want me to fail. They don't want me to lose. He looks bad if I lose. Right? And then it was somebody who's been around lending for years. And I'm not saying believe every lender and everything they tell you right off the bat. Use your gut and your best judgment. And then do your own research too. Like I didn't just say, okay, I'll take it out. I had to go do my own research. I had this network of investors that I had been working or building relationships with over the past 90 days. And I was able to go to them and say, hey, is this a thing? Do you guys do this? And they were like, yeah, absolutely, we do this. And yeah, do your own research and find out. And then understand a little bit about leverage, right? There's some risks that comes with leverage. If I'd have leveraged that money and then I went and bought a deal that doesn't make money, so it's costing me money for the deal, plus I still have to pay back the HELOC money, right? That could be painful, right? And understand yourself. If you're just not a person who's good with borrowed money, if you've got lots of credit card debt because you can't not go buy that cool pair of shoes, or that, for me, it's car parts. I'm a car parts guy. So if I can't not go buy those car parts, right, with that money, like then leverage isn't for you. You're just going to have a different method, or maybe a little slower method to building a portfolio. But if you can be disciplined with the money and you're good at finding good deals, you can scale pretty quickly.
I love that. And still unpacking more from that first answer. One of the things that you mentioned was that you started going to these meetups and meeting other people, surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And I want to point out something that you said when you talked to that one person that didn't know that buying a 100-unit apartment complex for the first deal is not a quote-unquote normal thing. It's because they surrounded themselves with those people. I've said this on my show several times, and you hear this on a lot of these different podcasts, but it's 100% true, right? If you surround yourself, let's say you're hanging out with 5 millionaires, you're going to be the sixth one, right? You're going to start taking on those things that they're doing, and it's going to start becoming second nature to you. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit more too. So you started going to some of these meetups, right? And you started seeing what some of these other folks are doing. What kind of questions were you asking as a new investor to really accelerate the way that you did? Because you scaled super fast. So I'm curious as to what kind of questions did you ask when you went to these meetups?
I don't really know what kind of questions I asked. I'll tell you my strategy for going to a meetup, especially when I was new, is naturally people are scared when you walk into a room full of people you've never met doing a thing you don't know how to do. And people are scared of rejection, right? So there's some fear at some point that they're not going to accept you. And then people are scared of being called out as the guy who doesn't know anything, right? And my whole working career in corporate America, I was like, I'm just waiting for the day that somebody figures out that I have no idea how to do my job. And that's not true, right? But we all have some level of fear like that, right? And you have to know that going in, because you have to fight against it. And most people don't do that. So they don't get the value out of the things that they're trying to do. And so my plan to fight against that was to fake it till you make it, speak with confidence, not lie, never lie. If somebody asked me if I ever done a deal, I'd absolutely tell them I hadn't done a deal. But I was going to speak as if I had, right? I was going to speak with confidence, like I belong there. So you have to make a conscious effort to carry yourself with confidence when you don't feel like you have it. And I've always been even in school, you got to sit in the power seats, right? And I knew wherever we went, if it was an audience set up in the chair set up in rows, I was going to be front and center, right? Front and center. The people who are front and center are the people who want to be there. They're the people trying to get the most out of whatever's happening. They're the people who tend to know the most, right? Because they're sitting in the confidence seats. They're sitting in the seats of people who know what the heck they're doing. And so just by you sitting in those seats, people view you differently than the people who walk in and hide in the back.
I like that a lot.
They see you. If you walk in and hide in the back, people think a certain thing about you, right? And if people think a certain thing about you, you start to think that thing about you. And so I was just trying to fight against all these things. And so whenever I go into new rooms, meetings, I try to sit in the power seats. I don't want to sit in the back because that's great networking too. I'm going to be sitting next to the people, the movers and the shakers. Like I want to talk to them. I want to build, and I want them to see me in a light of somebody with confidence. So I would start to notice as people were talking to me, right? And they'd say, we start talking about it, and they'd just be talking to me as if I'd done a deal. It's, oh, I haven't done a deal yet. You've never done a deal? They assumed I did because of how I carried myself, where I sat. And you're able to have people have confidence in you without ever even opening, just by doing some of those things. And then the only thing I could think to do was to try to figure out some way to be of service. And I think, like, it's a cliche answer. People say, if you want help, you got to give help. That's true. But that help doesn't have to be in the thing that you're there for. I didn't know anything about real estate investing. I wasn't going to walk in the door and be of service to some real estate investor before I knew anything. But I knew a lot about technology, and I knew a lot about building software. I knew a lot of different tools that could be useful for a real estate investor. I knew a lot of connections in the technology world. And I tell people, when you're in a room and you're trying to figure out a way to add value, first of all, that should be your goal when you go into a networking meeting. Your goal shouldn't be to see who I can meet so I can see what I can get out of it. Your goal should be to see who I can meet so I can figure out who I can help. If you walk in there in a mindset of giving instead of taking, people will remember that and they will naturally want to help you. We naturally want to help those that help us, right? And so change your mindset, sit in the power seats and look for someone to help. When you open your mind to looking for someone to help, you'll find it. You'll hear someone say something and be like, oh yeah, I got a contact for that. And then go above and beyond. And when I say that, sometimes if somebody has a need that you can meet, maybe it's outside of that group and it's not going to take you that long. Maybe it takes you 30 minutes. Maybe it takes you an hour. Maybe it takes you 15 minutes to do the thing. First of all, do the thing. Don't tell them you're going to do the thing. Just do it and give it to them, and do it on the spot if you can. Because if somebody has a problem and you come to them and say, hey, I heard you say X, Y, and Z. Here's a contact that I know does A, B, and C. I just called them, told them you might be reaching out to them. Their name is this. They're expecting your call. Mind blown, right? You solved a problem they didn't even tell you that they had, and you went out of your way and you didn't even know them. So now they will feel like they have to help you. And so as you start your journey, if you have questions, they will be glad to answer them. They will volunteer to answer them. They might volunteer to have you shadow them, all these things. And so many times we try to do the opposite. We try to walk in the door and say, hey, I'm Henry, I'm new. Can I shadow you? That's creepy. I don't know you. But if you say, hey, I'm Henry, I heard you say you were struggling with your website. I know a great SEO guy. I called him and he said he'd be happy to give you a chat with you and maybe start giving you some SEO tips. Here's his number. And we're like, that's amazing. Thank you. And then they'll volunteer to help you.
Yeah, no, Henry, I absolutely love that. If you sit here and you go to these meetups, like you said, get in those power seats, but go with the mindset of who can I help here, or how can I, as you're talking to these people, and if they're telling you that they have this issue or that issue, and you know somebody that can help them and you get them connected, that's huge. That's one of the things that I love about what I do here with the podcast, and when I go to these meetups too, is connecting people, because that right there is one of the things that builds such a stronger network for you, right? When you're able to connect the right people together, you don't necessarily have to be the right person. As long as you other people in your circle and you can get them connected together, that's a power play right there. It really is. Absolutely love that. Now, I know over time that you were working in your 9 to 5 and you were doing real estate as a side hustle. And as you were networking and getting more involved in this, I know that later on you were like, I want to get out of my 9 to 5. I want to replace my income completely. So you went from being an employee to a full-time entrepreneur. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And I know that this networking piece was a huge part of that. But what was some other things that when you made that decision to step away from that 9 to 5, what were some other things or other actions that you took to make that happen?
Yeah, I didn't quit my job until I absolutely had to, until it made no financial sense for me to still have my job. So I could have quit a couple of years before I did, but I probably would have had to alter my lifestyle a little bit. And I didn't want to do that. I also wanted to make sure that I had at least 2 years of income from my business. So 2 years of positive income coming from my business before I quit. Because when you quit your day job, the first thing that the banks are going to be concerned about is you don't have your day job. But if you can show that you've been operating a business for at least 2 years that is showing a profit, then you can use that to stay bankable. And so obviously with my strategy of leveraging small local banks, being bankable is a big part of that. So that's part of the reason why I stayed. My decision to leave came because basically my job said, we need you to do more work. And they did. They needed me to pick up my pace a little bit. And they needed, it was just, we were in a time that they needed help. And my natural inclination is to say, yeah, I want to do that. Of course, I want to help you. I want to do what's needed. But when you have a business or a side business that's also making money, you have to look at it from a financial perspective. And so it was really my wife who was like, hey, you may want to do the math before you make that decision and see if it's really the right decision. Is it going to cost you money to give them more time? And I was like, it may. So I really just, it was a math decision for me. It was like, take what you're making in your coaching and teaching business and in your real estate business and whittle that down to an hourly wage, right? And then whittle your salary job down to an hourly wage and then see what it's going to cost you to work for them for those hours versus working for yourself. And the numbers were drastically different. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. So I can't do that. And when I looked at it that way, it was less personal. It wasn't a personal decision. It was a financial decision. And I had a responsibility to do the thing that was going to benefit my family the most. And that meant focusing more on my business instead of working for somebody else.
Yeah, Henry, I love that is huge because you had to take your personal feelings out of it, right? You had to separate that and say, okay, we need to look at this from a financial, mathematical equation perspective, not how I personally feel about it. Because personally, yes, I want to help this company and help them grow, but I also want to help my own business grow. So it's like, what's yours is yours, and what's that other company's that other company's. Guess what?
Right.
I'm pretty sure after you left, they replaced you.
They were just fine.
Exactly. I said the same thing too when I retired from the Navy recently. I said, you know what? I said, at this point where I hit 20 years of service, I said, I'm working for half my pay. It's not logistically or financial or fiscally really great for me to stay. And I've got my other side businesses going on. I want to start focusing more on that full time. And I did something very similar. I just did the math and said, okay, if I stay in the Navy and I'm putting this much time into this versus what I could be doing here with my business, it was a no-brainer.
Right.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely love that. As you made this transition and you went full-time into your business, I like the way that you did that. So you said that you wanted to make sure that you had that 2 years of positive income from the business before you did that. Because I want to point this out to the people that are listening. If you start your own business, when you lose that W-2 income, the banks will not look too favorable on that because they're going to look at your business. And then especially if you're claiming a lot of business losses on your taxes,
That's right.
they're going to look at whatever that positive cash flow was. That's great that you had all this real estate and you claimed all this loss and you were at negative $100,000 for the year. You had no income. That's the way they look at it. You had no income. Now, I like that you pointed that out because I think that's an important piece that people need to understand that, yes, the other side of real estate's great, those tax savings that you get, but you still want to make sure that you're quote unquote making enough money to still be lendable, to still be able to go out and get these loans to purchase more real estate. Unless you've gone past that at that point and you're buying stuff with cash, then hey, good for you. That's awesome. But a lot of times I know for Henry, I know for
your
me,
pace and you're just subject to everything. Right?
I like to leverage debt. I'm a fan of velocity banking. It's one of the things I do myself. I think it's just a great way to borrow against a smaller rate and invest into something that makes double or more than what that interest rate is that I'm paying.
There's not one single wealthy person that doesn't use leverage to build wealth, even Dave Ramsey.
Ooh, shots fired. No, that's very true. It's very true. Debt is just another tool if used correctly. And I've talked about this on this show a lot too, because there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are at the point where they're trying to get out of debt so they could start getting into investing, right? They're trying to get out of that consumer debt. They have a lot of credit card debt and things like that. And yes, you want to get rid of those things. If it's debt that you're getting into that's not bringing you income, then that's something you want to consider like moving away from. I still use credit cards. I use the heck out of credit cards, to get all my points and everything, and I pay them off before interest hits. It's one of the beautiful things about being able to leverage your debt. But I saw you shaking your head a little bit, so I want to know what that was when I was talking about some of the credit cards. So what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my theory about paying off debt before you invest is obviously if you have high interest debt, that should be a focus of yours because that money is costing you money that you could be using to invest. But if you've got low interest debt, and high and low are relative terms. So for me, high interest is going to be above 10%, right? If it's below 10%, I know I'm getting above 10% cash on cash returns on my real estate. So it makes more sense for me to take the money that I would use to pay off that debt that's under 10%, invest it and let my investment pay off my debt. If it's over what I would average on a cash on cash return, then I would focus on paying it off because it doesn't make sense to take that money and invest it, right? It makes more financial sense to pay off that high interest debt. I think Don't get me, you can do both, is I guess what my answer is, because I think people use I'm paying off debt as a crutch to not get started investing.
Ooh,
Because they're
that's a very fair
scared.
point.
Because they're scared. And so what I'm saying is just be smart. I had somebody tell me, I can't wait. I'm almost going to pay off my student loans. And I was like, how much you got to go? Like 20 grand left. Oh, that's cool. So you're going to, and they were about to get a payout. And I'm going to take that 20 and pay off my student loans. I'm like, what's your interest on your student loans? That was like 3%. The heck are you going to pay off 3%? Who cares? Go invest that 20 grand in something that's going to make you 13%. Take 3% of that and pay your student loans and keep the other 10. That's just be smart about the debt that you're paying off. You can do both. If you focus on paying off all your debt and you pay the thousands of dollars of debt and it takes you 10 years to do it, in 10 years you'll just be, and if you live in a shoebox while you're doing it, in 10 years you'll just be debt free in a shoebox. Start to be smart about the debt you're paying off. Pay off the high interest stuff and invest in. But it takes more discipline. And I think that's where people get scared away, because now I have to be smart about an invest and then take the difference of the cash on cash return and then use that money to go pay off mine. Like, it's a little more complicated. It's not easy. It's not an easy button.
You got to be disciplined to do that, right? It's like you had mentioned earlier, it's that mindset, right? You have to have that mindset shift, and you got to look at money from a different perspective, right? You need to employ those dollars, not just take those dollars, right? Have your money make you more money, and then with that more money that it makes, pay off the other items, right? So usually every time there is a promotion where I can get 0% interest on a credit card, I'm usually swiping that sucker and then paying it off over time until I pay it off before the interest kicks in. But at the same time, it's kind of, man, I'm taking advantage of this quote unquote free money that's being given to me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I paid my first direct mail marketing campaign.
And you take your profits from that direct mail and you're able to pay off that credit card free. So you basically took free money. It was like, here's a free loan for you to go do what you got to do, and then boom. So yeah, I love that. Okay, awesome. Now I just want to hit one more thing before I transition this into the final round. And so there was something that you said earlier when you were talking about with these banks. They said, hey, this guy can come in here, Henry can find us great deals. We know that we want to lend to him. So speaking of finding great deals, what would you recommend to somebody that wants to learn how to find great deals?
Yeah, you got to find, we don't buy in this real estate investment world, right? Our goal is to buy something for less than its market value, add value to it in some way, shape, or form. So typically that's fixing it up, but it depends on the asset. It doesn't have to always be fixing it up, but add value to it, right? And then disposition it. So you're either going to sell it at its market value or you're going to rent it at its market value and create the cash flow, right? Whether that's short-term rentals, long-term rentals, midterm rentals, flipping it, wholesale. It's all the same strategy. Buy it low, add the value, sell it with the value in it. So typically in the real estate world, no one's just like randomly volunteering to take a loss selling a property to give up money, right? So if people are doing it, that means there's a reason they're doing it. That means there's some situation that they're in that requires them to sell this asset at a discount in order to solve some sort of problem. Maybe the problem is the property itself. Maybe the problem is they need the money from the property to go fix the problem. So we are not in the business of buying houses. We are in the business of buying situations. And so if you're going to be a deal finder, you got to be a situation finder, right? You got to learn how to market for situations. Maybe that situation is a ton of distress on a property. Maybe that situation is they inherited a property they don't know what to do with. Maybe that situation is their tenants don't pay rent and they can't kick them out. I've bought multiple properties from people who have tenants in there who aren't paying, and they were friends or family or some sort of personal connection that they did not want to evict them. So they just sold it within minutes so I have to come back and fix that problem, right? There's a bunch of different ways to market for situations. You can literally Google how to market for off-market deals. And essentially all you're going to find is figure out a situation that you like to look for it relentlessly consistent. Don't stop, keep looking. It will bear fruit. Then you buy those properties.
Absolutely love that. So you need to get in the business of being a problem solver, right?
Yep.
And that's huge. Heard this many times from some very successful real estate investors. Even Brandon Turner said that recently on my show, which was awesome. I think what he said was you get paid commensurate to the level of problems that you solve, right?
That's right.
So absolutely awesome. I love that. And one of the things I wrote down here is buy situations not properties.
That's
So
right.
that might be the name of this episode. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, Henry, that's awesome, man. I really love this. This has been like such informative interview already. And now I want to transition this into something called the final round. And this is going to give our listeners an idea of how Henry Washington is when he's under some type of pressure or dealing with a problem, which I'm pretty sure, I'm confident that you're going to give us some great key nuggets here.
Awesome.
All right, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So the first question is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made in real estate?
Biggest mistake I ever made was, it was a two-part problem, same property. Not understanding the quality of tenant that I wanted to keep and being so excited about the numbers, because this is a numbers business, right? They say, don't get too excited about the look and the feel and don't get your emotions in it when you go look at it. I didn't have that problem. My problem was I saw the numbers and was like, yeah, this is a deal. Look at that cash flow. I'm buying this no matter what. And because I got so pumped up about the numbers looking so great, I overlooked the quality of tenant that I would have long term. And I overlooked some of the due diligence. I didn't get into every single unit in this property and investigate every unit with a fine-tooth comb like I would have investigated it if it was just a one-unit single-family home. And so we ended up spending a whole lot more on the rehab and a whole lot more. It was still a great cash flow deal, but even once I got the units fixed up and rented out, I was just having problem after problem with the tenants. And when you buy a property that's got a C class or below tenant, it takes a special kind of property management. Sometimes you can't manage those properties the same way that you manage a B or a C plus property. And there's not a lot of good managers that want to manage those things. And I care about people. I think that it's part of who I am. And I couldn't find a manager who would manage the people the way I wanted them to be managed. And this was the kind of property and the kind of place where if I had to put them out, there probably wasn't any place else for them to go. And I just didn't want to be in the business of making people homeless, even though it's not my fault, right? Like their situation is their situation. If they can't pay rent, they can't pay rent. That's what most landlords think and feel. That's fine. I'm cool with people thinking that, but I don't feel great having to be in that situation. And so I didn't think through any of those things before I bought the property. So we ended up selling it.
That's always a tough situation to be in. And it actually it's giving me PTSD flashbacks to my actual first duplex that I bought, where I had that same kind of issue. I bought it sight unseen. I was out here in Hawaii. The property was all the way back on the East Coast in Virginia, and did everything via video and pictures and said, okay, yeah, this is good. The numbers look great. Let's do it.
I'm not saying these people don't deserve a good place to live. I'm not saying they don't deserve service. What I am saying is, if you're going to buy those types of properties, your business needs to be built different. It needs to be built different. It needs to be staffed different. It's a niche almost. And you need to be set up so that you can properly service that niche.
Right. You have to have the right team in place.
So they can be treated well and fairly. I wasn't set up for that, and I was doing them a disservice because of it.
Yep. Nope. Same here. Yeah, that's fantastic. No, great points, right? You have to have that right team in place. So I absolutely love that answer. Thank you so much. All right, Henry. So this next question kind of ties into that one as well. But what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started?
It takes money to buy real estate. It just doesn't have to be yours.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
I think part of the apprehension for me, it took me 90 days to get my first deal. But what a lot of people don't know is I almost stopped through there and just didn't do it because I couldn't figure out this money piece. And that's the piece that most people get hung up on when they want to get started. They're like, I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. I have no idea how I can buy all these properties. And so they get scared because they don't want to get themselves in a situation where they feel like they don't have the money to go do something. It's embarrassing, right? Nobody wants to be in that boat. And what I had to realize was that there's a million ways to buy property, and several of them don't require you to have to use your money. And once I stopped focusing on not having the money and just started focusing on find the deal, then none of the money thing was a problem. The deal is what's the hard part. The deal is what's important. And there's so many people out there who want to do what you do, but they don't want to find the deal because it's hard work. And so when you bring that deal, the money tends to find you.
I love that. Yeah. If you find the deal, they will come.
I would have saved so much time and stress just putting the blinders on and focusing on that one thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. I definitely appreciate that. All right. This question is going to tie into that as well. And I think this is a good follow on. Do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started today?
100%. Exactly. Ties into this. It is We talked a little bit about it before when we talked about it doesn't matter what your disposition strategy is. We have to buy something under market value, add value to it, and then sell it at market value or rent it at market value. It doesn't matter the strategy. Rentals, long-term, short-term, wholesale, flip, the common denominator amongst all those strategies that people want to use to make money is you have to find a good deal for that strategy to work. And so when you're new, like a great part about a real estate investing is that it's super flexible and there's a million and one ways to make $1 million. But that's also super intimidating and scary because where you focus if you're brand new, and people just get overwhelmed and don't do anything, right? They call it analysis paralysis, but they really ain't even analyzing. They're just scared because they don't know what to do. So put the blinders on, focus on the common denominator. The common denominator amongst every real estate strategy is finding a good deal. So the two things you should be focused on when you're brand new, the only two things you should be focused on when you're brand new are learning what a good deal is in your market. Every market is different. Different strategies work better in different markets. So learn what a good deal is in your market. You can do that just by going to meetups, sitting in those power seats, asking the person next to you. Just say, hey, if you're trying to learn, tell me about your last deal. Did you flip it? Did you rent it? Did you wholesale it? What'd you do on your last deal? How'd you find it? What neighborhood was it in? We love talking about our deals. Right. And so somebody will gladly tell you, oh, yeah, I bought XYZ house and we did about 20 grand to it and we sold it for this and we found it this way. And they'll give you all that. But what you're learning then is, okay, this investor buys deals in these neighborhoods. They're paying about this for it. They're putting about that into it. They're selling it for this. They're renting it for that. Right. That's all metadata that you need to make note of. And you'll start to understand what a good deal looks like in your market. Once you learn what a good deal looks like in your market, pick one deal finding strategy, just one. Some people love direct mail. Some people love cold callers. Some people love cold calling themselves. Some people love text messages. Some people love just buying on the MLS, right? Some markets you can still do that. Right. The market's shifting right now. There's a lot more markets you can buy a good deal on the MLS than before right now, right? Whatever that one strategy is to find your situation that you're going to buy, pick one. Pick the one that fits your personality and your budget the best. Every strategy is going to cost you money and or time. Pick the one that fits your budget the best, because if you can't fund a deal finding strategy appropriately, you're just throwing money down the drain or you're wasting time. If you're only going to send 200 pieces of mail, you just wasted whatever it costs you to send 200 pieces of mail. You're not going to get a deal off 200 pieces of mail unless you get extremely lucky. You got to send enough volume. So figure out what it costs to fund it appropriately. Make sure it fits your budget. If it doesn't fit your budget, move on to the next strategy till you find the one that you can do month over month without killing yourself, and then find the one that fits your personality. I'm not a phone sales guy, so I don't cold call. I could say, I need to suck it up and learn how to do this and be a beast at cold calling, but it's not in me. That's not my thing, right? And so I could lie to myself and say, I'm going to make 30 cold calls every day until I start landing deals, and I'll get cursed out after the first 2 calls, and then I won't make any more calls, right? So direct mail seemed to fit my personality better. It seemed to be something that I could afford, so that I could do it. So pick one that fits your personality, that fits your budget, and relentlessly pursue it until it bears fruit. Don't change strategies because you're just starting that ball all over again. Once you get that first deal, take some of that money, funnel it back into your marketing strategy so that you don't have to worry about paying for it out of your pocket anymore. And boom, now you're a real estate investor. Don't stop. Don't ever stop.
I love that. Be relentless. That is awesome, Henry. What a fantastic answer. So many great nuggets there. And I knew this was going to happen. I knew that I was going to get some good stuff out of these questions. Awesome. Now, the final question of the final round, and I will preface this with, besides your own, you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
Yeah. I'm a feelings guy. So like how-to books aren't really my thing, but like mindset, feelings, I love that stuff. So I'll give you one of each because not everybody's like that. So if you're a feelings guy and you're or gal and you're like mindset, living in the moment, like doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, I love The Alchemist. It's my favorite book, just as far as like living in your passion, doing the thing you're called to do. The universe gets out of your way. It's all true and amazing and inspiring. Love it. So The Alchemist. And then if you want a good, like the best how-to book, I should say the one that stuck with me when I got started that really gave me the real estate investing guardrails was The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller, because it just did a great job of saying, yes, we all know real estate investing is a thing. Here's actually what you need to go do that. Here's the people you need on your team. And it just helped put the guardrails around what does it really look like for you to go out here and be a real estate investor. Who do you really need involved to help you be successful? It was pretty powerful book.
Yeah, no, awesome. Love that. That two great recommendations. I've not read The Alchemist yet, though. That is on my list because I've heard that one before. I've had the Millionaire Real Estate Investor come up on the show a lot as well. So definitely some great recommendations. Now, Henry, this interview has been awesome. Again, so many great golden nuggets of wisdom here. So I have to ask you probably the most important question of all, because my listeners are sitting here saying, man, Henry's got me pumped up. I want to know more about him and what he's doing. And I want to get some more of these motivational tips. So where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website, social media, or even podcast or anything that you could share with us that they can go check out?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at the Henry Washington on Instagram. I give away tons of free information and game on Instagram. You can also check out my website. It's www.henrywashington.com. And I think you can get a free book there on all that small bank financing that we talked about. And then you can check me out. Always check me out on Bigger Pockets. We're always putting out free content there. Just literally Google Henry Washington Bigger Pockets, and there's tons of videos. Check out On the Market podcast. That's the new podcast we got going. It's super fun. It's out there. Go find me.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to make it easy for everybody. We're going to have Henry's links in the show notes, so you could just click or copy and paste away, or you could just Google them, and you're going to find some great information. Henry, again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's been super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And to my listeners, thank you for joining me and our special guest, Henry Washington, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's episode with Henry. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.